You know what? It's actually been sunnier lately, which is nice for this time of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere. So let's answer questions asked by $3 supporters at Patreon and Subscribestar during September. If you'd like to ask a question for October, the links are below. Let's start on Patreon, where Darth Vega asks, I heard a creationist say once that the fact that some objects in the universe spin in the opposite direction disproves the Big Bang. What are your thoughts on that? Why do they spin differently? God, creationists say the dumbest things. Why would things not spin whichever way? What would make them all spin the same way? This question makes no sense. It seems to imply that there's some sort of universal spin, which is just idiotic. What would cause the Big Bang to spin? What would it be spinning in relation to? If it were spinning, we'd see it in the cosmic background radiation. It'd be stretched out and arcing in a spiral. It isn't. As far back as we can see, the universe is not spinning. It's not just observational. According to every single law of physics we've been able to devise, the early universe was one of almost complete isotropy. The universe is the same in every direction, to something like 1 part in 100 trillion. There are very slight deviations in the background radiation, and that little bit of chaos is what allowed galaxies and galactic clusters to form in gravity wells. Surveys of spiral galaxies show that they spiral in all sorts of directions and orientations, which is exactly what we would expect in a universe that isn't spinning. So the question to ask the creationist is, why would you expect the universe to be spinning? What would make it spin? What would keep it spinning? Where would the energy for the spin come from? We would have so much less creationist idiocy to deal with if they just think through their supposed gotchas for just a few minutes. I've mentioned this technique before. Think you've got some amazing idea? Spend 5 minutes thinking it over. Literally, look at a clock or use a timer app or something, and take 5 actual minutes thinking it over. It's amazing how mulling it over for just that short amount of time can either show the enormous problems with what you've thought of, or make it a much more solid idea to propose. DeltaWolf asks, Hey Shane, some people love to use the Grafton, New Hampshire Free State Project as proof that libertarianism doesn't work. What would your response be? Yeah, this is an old one. I'm not going to spend time going over it again. You can search it yourself if you want details. This is the whole, hey there, anarchist utopia was foiled by bears, heard there, that Vox and Salon and a bunch of others grabbed onto in complete desperation. Grafton has a history of bear attacks, so much so that the government had issued bear bounties for something like 200 years. Despite that, and despite increasing the number of bear hunting permits, the bears bred faster than people were allowed to kill them, and their numbers had been increasing for something like 2 decades before the Freetown Project. It's not even local to Grafton. This has just always been an issue throughout New Hampshire's history. Bear attacks that had happened, not regularly, but more often than most of the rest of the country, went unreported beyond local coverage until the state cultists went looking for excuses to say that Grafton had failed. And there the bears were, so good enough. As long as you don't ask what the statistics were in Grafton before. The anarchist position would be to let more people hunt bears or shoot bears in self-defense, but the licenses still weren't being granted in sufficient numbers, and when they went to the state to appeal that, New Hampshire officials just reminded them that killing bears without a license was illegal and completely ignored their concerns. And of course, while they're screeching about bears, they're not talking about all the improvements in Grafton, including a decreasing crime rate at a time when crime in the state was increasing, a higher median income, lower unemployment, lower housing costs, and better high school graduation rates. But that's very typical of how the peddlers of bogosity operate. Padmanaban asks, What are your thoughts on voucher programs? Is it a legitimate complaint that tax money from them often goes to religious schools, possibly violating the Establishment Clause? Well, anyone who says that doesn't understand the Establishment Clause. It would be a violation if you didn't fund religious schools as well as secular. In fact, they reaffirmed it just a couple of years ago in Carson v. Macon. Maine offered school vouchers, but excluded religious-based schools. The court ruled, quote, "In particular, we have repeatedly held that a state violates the Free Exercise Clause when it excludes religious observers from otherwise available public benefits." They referenced Sherbert v. Verner, Everson v. Board of Education of Ewing, Thomas v. Review Board of the Indiana Employment Security Division, Trinity v. Comer, Espinoza v. Montana Department of Revenue, and several others. They ruled, "The state pays tuition for certain students at private schools, so long as the schools are not religious. That is discrimination against religion. A state's anti-establishment interest does not justify enactments that exclude some members of the community from an otherwise generally available public benefit because of their religious exercise." This complaint has been made, and it has failed time and time and time again. Of course, the state shouldn't be funding education at all, but that's a different issue. Over on Subscribestar, Tomasz Urbański asks, "Will recent events triggered by Unity Technologies become the next textbook example for why abusing market position doesn't really work?" Yeah, Unity walked that back in record time, didn't they? Mostly due to the giant sucking sound of developers going over to Unreal and Godot, which, let's face it, are better engines anyway. At the time of me writing this question, many game developers publicly expressed a desire to turn away from using Unity game engine. As for today, no regulatory body reacted, though probably they will in the next months. Key here is that even though, quoting Eli the computer guy, migration sucks, the market reacted to abusers even before any government laws are put into effect. That's how it always happens. We've covered numerous examples. The market reacts quickly and swiftly. The government comes along months, if not years later, applies the wrong fix, makes things worse, and claims credit. And that'll do it for another month. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell, and check out other videos on my channel and like and share them to get them above the shadow banning. Seriously, people, that really helps. Sharing gets the video a boost in views beyond the people who watch directly because you shared. It just makes the algorithm show it more. And of course, go to donate.bogosity.tv for all sorts of ways to support, including PayPal, Venmo, and various cryptocurrencies. Thanks again, and until next time, stay strong and be free.